Hello, my name is Samara Hayley Steele, and it is an honor to be joining you today from the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people in what is known today as Western Washington, specifically on the land of the Lummi people. I am honored to be speaking to you today about my project Beyond Colonial Ecocide, which was generously supported by the Mellon Foundation as part of the Mellon Public Scholars program over summer of 2020. This project involved working with a number of organizers, both within and outside of Indigenous communities, who were often allied organizations, and working to develop media that center the voices of Indigenous people and communities while addressing climate change and environmental issues. Now, my collaborators and community partners on this project included Lina Green, who wrote the book Sustainable Impact: How Women Are Key to Ending Poverty, and who has also done work as an angel investor of projects that are led by Indigenous women. I also worked with Lee Francis IV of the Pueblo Nation, who is the creator of Indigenous Pop X, formerly known as Indigenous Comic Con, and the owner of Red Planet Books in New Mexico, one of 6 Indigenous-owned bookstores in North America. And he's done a great deal of work organizing between Indigenous artists working towards creating sci-fi that incorporates and showcases Indigenous futurisms and Indigenous futurity. Also on this project, I worked with David Karabelnikov, who is of the Ananga people of the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, and he has done a great deal of work in Indigenous economics, and he's co-founder of the First Alaskans Network. He's spoken before the UN about the topics of climate change and indigeneity. And as someone who is Indigenous Alaskan, he has the that extra level of knowledge firsthand about what climate change is doing to those who are located in the more northern and southern parts of the planet. So let's see, there we go. Something that came up right away as we began working and collaborating together and building strategies is, we began really talking and thinking about the situation of Indigenous women in the United States. An organization that Lina has worked with before, Native Women Lead, has these statistics on their website. In 2016, 2/3 of all American Indian and Alaska Native women in the United States were primary breadwinners in their family. But Native women are paid only 57 cents for every dollar paid to white non-Hispanic men. And 4 in 5 Native women will experience violence in their lifetimes. And so these are really tough statistics, and it can be hard from a media maker and sort of economic collaborator perspective to really think, okay, what are some strategies we can build to start changing these really difficult statistics. And an idea that David and Lina initially came up with as they were talking about different projects that Lina had worked on funding and sharing notes with the projects that David had been part of with different Indigenous communities around the world in his work as an environmental activist, is we began identifying something we started calling the super weaver archetype, which exists both in the real world and in some stories already in media. And as we began sort of aligning, this concept of what is this archetypal figure? How does this figure change the narratives and the structure of narratives that it's within? We worked together to create something we've sometimes called the Superweaver Manifesto, a document called Beyond the Superhero, The Rise of the Superweaver, a manifesto for artists and investors. And you can actually see that up on the Imagining America website. It was included as part of the Imagining America quilt this year. And this call for a new archetype also appeared in the Slingshot sort of artist activist newsletter, which has a circulation of 20,000 in the United States. So we worked to get that call to action out there to begin elevating narratives of what we'd worked to identify as superweaver figures in films and stories, and beyond putting together this call to action, which in some ways was about working to calibrate between ourselves and other artists, other activists in different communities of what we meant when we were talking about not only incorporating Indigenous protagonists into films, but also ways of knowing that go beyond colonial ecocide. And as we work to develop this, we also developed pieces of curriculum that can be incorporated into freshman composition classes, as I incorporated into the university writing program class that I taught this fall, which included some of the curriculum we developed as part of this project. Along with these two elements of the project, the curriculum development and the call to action, we also created a pitch pilot that was 16 pages and is currently being looked at by a few media production companies. In our pitch pilot, we're really talking about wanting to lay the framework to allow an Indigenous woman-led production studio begin creating stories that center Indigenous women. So that's another part of the project. Something that we were, kind of impressed to notice as we were, excuse me, trying to move the picture of my head here. Something we were impressed to notice as we were researching, this figure who sometimes appears in more mainstream film, is that the superweaver archetype, is definitely, something that has sort of a proven market. Moana grossed nearly $700 million. Princess Mononoke, $160.8 million US. And even a rather independent film, a low budget film like Whale Rider in 2003, grossing over $40 million. So, these projects within the scope of larger media, even though they're somewhat rare when compared to other types of narratives that don't center Indigenous female heroes or center Indigenous ways of knowing or post-ecocidal ways of knowing, these are rather rare, but when they do show up, they actually do tend to be successful. So that one of the arguments that we did make when presenting this with certain individuals was just that this is an untapped market. So the hope truly is to begin telling stories that help our communities better center the narratives of Indigenous women and better support projects in the future that are led by Indigenous women. So thank you very much for your time and attention to this project, and my email can be reached here for those who have any questions. Thank you so much.